All right, so let's get started with the state of this app. Actually, before I do that, let's turn off this black background. And if you're wondering, if you watched the last video, you didn't see these buttons there. I made a mistake in one of the CSS classes. I did a dash instead of an underscore. So I just cleaned up these CSS classes, and now we can see the buttons of the app. So let's get rid of that black background here. Should be here. Yeah, there we go. And so I'm going to copy and paste a lot of code for this tutorial. There's a lot of lines, and I can't remember them and write them in real time for you guys. So I'm going to do a lot of copy and pasting, and I'm just going to explain along the way. So let me copy and paste the state for this foreground component. All right, so I pasted it. Let's do a bit of formatting. My keyboard went all weird. Let's go back to United States. All right, so this is the state of the app. We have decks, cassettes. We'll get to that in a second. We have loaded. This tells the app whether or not to load the loading page or the player. We have should resize. We use that for telling certain components whether or not, based on the user doing this, whether or not that component needs to resize. We have is closed. So the player is going to handle whether or not the deck swipes down or slides up. We use the is closed for that. Is playing. That's used by the ticker to animate the text scrolling. New track, and that's just used to signal. And you'll see a lot of this as we go through the app. It's very abstract now. Once you see it working, it makes more sense. New track just tells the app to load in that GIF that rotates the cassette, and then when we turn it to true or we flip this new track, it'll show the pause GIF. Again, you'll see it in action. It'll make a lot more sense. Current track, current deck. That's for the ticker to show the song. Current deck, excuse me, that's not for the ticker. That's for the options. Based on what the user chooses here, let's go to the options page. Based on what the user chooses here, that's going to be the current deck. Currently, we just have orange. And load, that's also for the options. That's for these two buttons, whether or not to swipe these basically play exit animations. Direction just has to do with these guys here, whether or not to go left or right. 0 is for left, 1 is for right. Let's go back to the foreground page. Foreground. So that's the basic state for this app. And we're going to be using two different types of state. We're going to do a global state with my context, and we're also going to do prop drilling or prop passing down. Now, why two different types? That's because if we just do the my context and we hook up all of the components to that global context, anytime this re-renders, any sort of variable in this guy re-renders, it'll cause a re-render of every single component. Because we're animating this, we're going to animate this ticker. Once this thing starts scrolling left to right, if it re-renders, it resets the animation. So for that reason, we're using prop passing for the ticker, and for everything else, we're using the global my context. And speaking of global my context, should we do that now? No, how about we do this now? Let me show you how we're organizing the images, so we don't have to hard code them. So I'm just get the images ledger. Throw that in the source folder. All right, let's go back. And so I'm organizing all of the images like this, images ledger. And that's just so we don't have to hard code we don't have to do this. We don't have to hard code the string, the path to the image. We can just use an object like this. So we have two objects, one object, one array. Dex is an object, an array of cassettes we're using. So we have Dex, we have Orange, we have Cyberpunk. They both have a default state. That's for the options page. That's what you see here. That's default-deck orange.gif GIF. Let me go back. And then we have different types of cassettes. Currently for this app, I just have a Punk Dark and a 70s Retro Light. I might do these later, who knows. You guys can do whatever you want, but each cassette has three different states. The play, this one's the pause, that's 70s Retro Light, that's the Punk Dark. So that would be this guy right here. And then they have a load animation, that animation where the cassette flings down into the deck. So that's how we're organizing our inventory of decks and cassettes. So let me close this, and let's get with let me import that first, and then we'll do the global my context. So import, and that was the images, images ledger. So decks and cassettes. This will be from slash images light. There we go. .js. And I'm going to import the context now, and I'll make it right now. So my context, this is going to be from / my context.js. Let's make that file now. So in components, we'll just do a my context.js. We'll do an import of React from React. And then we'll do what it would be const my context is equal to React.create context. Yeah, there we go. And we'll just export that. Export default my context. There we go. Save, export, default. Spell it right. Fault. So I imported it. Let's use it. So we'll go down here and we'll just wrap our entire little app in that context. So my context.provider, and the value is going to be equal to the state of this this component, this foreground component. This.state. Let's go here, take this, and paste it down here. Format. There we go. All right, looks good. Value. You saved. Did anything break? Compiled successfully. All right, before we start passing our props down through the tree and using the context, how do we get this fixed? We're going to start aligning these things properly. So we're going to align the foreground. So the player, we need to align the ticker and the options page, which we'll get to in a second. I'll show you guys that in a second. All right, so let me copy and paste some code, and then I'll explain it for you guys. All right, so I just copied and pasted a component did mount. So every time this thing mounts, it's going to calculate a certain dimension, and it's going to resize this app. And so let's go line by line. So const desktop size 30. It's 30% of the width. Mobile size is 40% of the width, and the threshold is 500. You can put that to whatever you want. So if the where did I have it? So if the inner width, so if the window is less than 500, we're going to use 40% of the width to put the app on. If it's larger than 500 like that, it's just going to be 30%. So that's what this line says. New container width, mobile threshold, give me 30 or excuse me 40, else give me 30. And this height ratio, that's the divided by, earlier on in the videos I said it was a 1.6 ratio. In order to adjust for certain dimensions on the HTML, we bumped that up to 1.84. But we still have the look of the cassette where it's wider than it is higher. So that's the height threshold or height ratio, excuse me. And we calculate the new height based on the width. So it's just the container width divided by that ratio, which should be 1.6, but because we're in HTML and there's some aligning issues, we do 1.84, and we just multiply it by the aspect ratio. That's just the width divided by the height, just to adjust this according to whatever monitor the user is using. And so we got a new container width, new height. We set the container width and height, and then we set the state. Should resize. We just flip it to indicate that yes, we should resize. We load in the decks from here. We load in the cassettes from there, and we set loaded to true so we don't see the loading page. We'll get to that later. And of course, we have the add listener resize, which just repeats all of this logic. So every time the user does this, scrolls, it recalculates the new width, the new height, sets those things, and it sets the state to should resize, and it resizes this guy. So let's use these guys. So we have this container width and height. So copy this. Let me put it down here, and these guys will be null. Null. Let's do null, and then we need one more. We need this dot container underscore main is equal to null. So let's use it down here. That would be container. We want to resize this right here. All right, so we don't need this this hard coding 30% stuff. Let's do it like this. Width, height, class name. We need a ref from this guy, so ref is equal to, let's do ref underscore ID, arrow function, this dot container underscore main is equal to ref underscore ID. And we're going to do the width is now equal to this dot container width, and same thing for the height. this.container underscore height. Save, there we go. So if we resize, that's about 30%. Resize, it's about 40%. This would be 50, so yeah, that's 40%. So this is things resized. Notice the text here, how it's small relative to the background, and now it's large. We're going to go into the ticker and basically resize every refresh. Let's do, how do I want to do this? Yeah, it looks good. All right, so let's go to the ticker and do the resize code. All right, so I'm just going to copy and paste some code, and I'll explain it to you guys. All right, so every re-render, and it's going to know how to re-render because we have to pass down something to it, a prop. I'll pass that down later. So every time this guy runs, this should resize, it doesn't really matter if it's true or false. What matters is this guy went from true to false or from false to true. So it just changed state. And since this guy's holding, or it's going to hold, that should resize, every time it detects some sort of state change on that should resize, it's going to run this little function here, which is to say, calculate the font size based on the background height, and I think it's 70%. Yeah, so 70% of that black bar, that horizontal bar in pixels. So let's do this. Let's use it here. So we need a ticker text and a ticker background. Let's do ref is equal to, and ref underscore ID, arrow function. And it's not a this, it's a function. So we'll just do ticker text is equal to ref ID. And I have to make those variables before I forget. And this is ref is equal to, and that would be ref underscore ID is equal to, not equal to, arrow function, ticker background is equal to ref underscore ID. Let's make those two guys up here. Let's do a, what do we need? We need a let ticker background equal null and ticker text equal null as well. Format, save, and we need to pass down that should resize thing. So our player is going to get passed 4 things. Right now I'm just going to do the should resize. So should resize equal to this.state.should resize. And now the player needs to pass that down to the ticker. So player right here. Let's do a should resize and equal to, and that would be the props.should resize, which we need props right here. There we go, format. Should resize, ticker, use effect. We need to import that method. Use effect. Okay, there we go. So pay attention to the size of the font here. And it resizes based on how large or how small the player is. All right, so let's move on to the, should we move on to the options? Yeah, we'll do the options page. And then we'll come back and I'll fill out the last 3 things that the player is going to prop drill down. So options page. All right, let me copy and paste some code and I'll explain it. All right, let me just paste the code here. There we go. And I need the use effect because I'm using the use effect. Use effect, and I need a use state because I'm using that force update. So use state. And I need the actual use state here. So const. And then we'll do what? Force update and force update like that, I think it is, equals use state. And let's just do this just so you can differentiate between the two. All right, so just like we had to use effect here because it's a function, not a class, we're also using the use effect because it's a function, not a class. And we don't really care about saving any sort of state in force update. We're just using this guy, use state, to force an update, force refresh. This force update is the equivalent of, you could say, this.force update like that if you had a class component, but we don't have a class component. We just have a function component. So we're just forcing this component to re-render. And when it re-renders, it's going to set its own resize. So when it first renders, it's going to run this code, just like the foreground here. When it first renders, it calculates a new width, new height. When this guy first renders, it calculates a, let me do this so we can see it. Options. There you go. It calculates a new font size for these guys, and we add a listener for resize. Now, why did we just have one line here, but we had a whole new event listener here? Well, this options page doesn't know that the foreground player or the ticker exists. This options page is a different app. This is the foreground app in the bottom right corner. There's an options page when you right click, click options, or an options app when you right click, click options, and there's a pop-up app. We'll get to that later. So these are three separate apps. This guy, options page, has no idea that these guys exist. And so it needs to set its own resize event listener. With that said, let me get the references to these guys. So I'm going to need, what am I going to need? Name, navigator, deck type, and page. Let's do that. Let's start with the page first. So ref is equal to, and we'll just do a ref, ID, arrow function. It's a function component, so there's no this. We'll just do options, page is equal to ref underscore ID. Options page, right? Yeah. And options name, options navigator, options deck type. So name is right here. Let me copy and paste this. DCK underscore type. And let's create those guys here. We'll do let's. So options name is equal to null. Format, save. There we go. And do this. And let's change the percentage for this navigator. It's too large. It's doing that overlapping stuff. That would be navigator. Let's make it 50. Let's try 60%. See what that looks like. 60% or 6%. Excuse me, not 60%. There we go. That's better. All right. So no matter where we size it, the options page is always 60% in here. A little square within the page, and these guys scale accordingly. There we go. That's good. Do we do this? There we go. All right, so these guys are responsive and they're properly aligned. Let's go back to the foreground page. All right, let me close the options page. And ticker we don't need right now. All right, so the prop drilling. So we need right here, should resize. The ticker needs to know, let me just copy and paste it. The ticker needs to know the current track, new track. Here, I need to know is playing, so the ticker needs this guy here. Please copy all four. It doesn't need the new track, so I'll delete that. So is closes by the player, so it can slide it in and out. Let me paste them here. And is playing, we don't need the new track, current track, so the guy knows this was going to be equal to this dot state dot is playing is closed is equal to this dot state dot is closed, and finally current track is equal to this dot state dot current deck track. Format, save, and let's do a current track here. Let's just do, I don't know, artist dash song. All right, let's pass these guys to the ticker now. So the player has them. Should be the current track is equal to props dot current track, and you need the is playing. That's equal to props dot is playing, and let's use those guys in the ticker now. Ticker, 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 right here. Props, instead of this, right here, we'll change this. And we'll just do the props dot current underscore track. There we go. Let's see if that works. Let's go up here. Artist song. We'll call it Sam. Did it change? Yeah, good. All right, put back to song. All right, so that's for the prop drilling or prop passing. I think that's it for the app. The rest of the app uses the global context. And so the components that use that are going to be the, let me see if I can remember this. It's going to be player body, buttons, options page, and one last thing was the deck. All right, let's start importing the context. So we're going to do an import of my context from dot slash, no dot slash, my context, good. Let's copy that line. Let's paste that here. Let's paste that up here. Paste that here as well. And we'll just import it from here. Use context. Use context as well. Use context. And need here. That would be use context. And one last one, use context. Use context. All right, let's actually get it now. So const my context is equal to use context of my context. Let's copy these two lines. Save. All right, what do we need my context for the player body? Player body, player body, player body. Okay, so this image right here, it's going to come from a function called get. It's get deck image. Yeah, I think it's get deck image. That's going to be a function in the context. So we'll create that later. But for now, I'll put it right in here. So we'll do this. Delete that. We'll do the my context.get deck image. Actually, before it's going to break, let me just do it right now. So in the next phase, we're going to write all the functions. But for now, just to keep this thing so you can see it, I'm going to do something like this. We're going to have a bunch of functions. So get deck image. It's going to be an arrow function. And I'm just going to return that string. Dot slash images slash deck slash pause. Which type of deck? Let's go orange. And orange, ANGE. Which type of cassette? We'll do 70s retro. Retro light. .gif. There we go. Get deck image. Am I returning that properly? Return images slash deck. Is it deck or decks? Let's see if I get an error there. Compiled successfully and it's not here. Player body. Oh, I see why. We're not passing it through. So we have to pass all of these functions. It's going to be littered with functions later. So I'm just going to do this. There. And let's do values equal to this. This. And it's going to be get deck image. No, not that. And this value is going to be this.get deck image. There we go. Let me see if that works. It's properly doing it, or if it's just in the cache. Play. All right, yeah. Let's go back to pause. Okay. So that's it for the player body. That's going to get the deck image. That function is going to get a lot more complicated, but for now we're just returning that. ID, that's same. All right, let's go to the player buttons. These guys are going to have on clicks. So let's just do, what should I do? Let's do this. Can I do this here? There we go. On click equals, and it's going to be this dot, and there's going to be a function call here. Actually, not this dot. What am I doing? It should be my context dot, my underscore context dot, and this one is going to be, I think it's going to be open underscore close. It's not going to call it right away. Open close. This guy is the, what is this, start pause? Play pause. It's going to be play underscore pause. And this is going to be the, is this previous or next? That is next and then previous. I think I did the start pause, not play pause. We'll change that in a second. Next track and then previous track. This guy should be start pause. Start pause like that. And so let's create those functions quickly. Not the actual logic, just to have them in there. Let's go back to the foreground. Let's do this. Let me copy this. Yank. So it's going to be the open close player, start pause, next track, previous track. And this guy's going to be previous track. Let's load them up in the global state. So right here. It's going to be go this dot previous track. All right, it's good for the player buttons. So let me keep that open in case we need to add some more functions. So player body's good. Player buttons is good for now. If I miss anything, I'll go back and do it later. Options page. Let's do deck first. All right, so instead of this this string here, let's put that in a variable. Let's just do the default deck. Let's do const default deck is equal to, we want the images path. This guy's going to be in, we'll do a slash, now we have the slash decks, slash, and it's going to be in my context, not that my context, my underscore context, dot decks, the images ledger, so decks, and it's going to be, we need the current deck that we're on, so my context again, and we need the current underscore deck, and we just want the default. So let's see if that works. Let's delete all this. And we actually need the options page so we can see it. Delete this, go to the options page. All right, let's do default deck. Score deck, save. And there's nothing there. Why isn't there anything there? Can't be property decks of undefined. Undefined, what does that mean? Oh, okay, yeah. So I think I mentioned that all these three apps they're compartmentalized. They don't know about one another. And so the options page has no idea about the context because we only coded for this context in the foreground app, the actual cassette player, the deck. And so we need to copy not all of this code, but most of this code and just wrap the options page. Let me copy all of this, including the state. We're going to copy it again later on. I think I mentioned this in one of the videos, that the options page is just a mirror image or a copy of the foreground script. We just replace the player with the options page. So we do Control C here. Let me get the options page here. The options container, actually. Let's take all this away. Delete that. We can delete this as well. And we'll see. Control V. Provider. We need to end this. So my context provider. So we have all the state, we have the functions. We don't really use the functions for the options page, but we're not going to make these two files so dissimilar. It just makes it easy. And so this will have access to the my content. We need to import that along with the ledger. So these guys right here. Control C, Control V. Let's do a save and see what we get. Still nothing, huh? Property default of undefined. You know what I think's happening? Okay, I see. So this thing's loading twice, I think. Let me see if I'm right on that. Let's do this. Console.log. There, save. Control-Shift-J. Yeah, it's loading twice. It's loading once as soon as this thing renders, and then it's loading twice when we set the state. And then so the first time it loads, we don't have the decks or the cassettes, and so we actually need to code for the loaded variable here. So let me delete this first. And I might as well do it in the foreground as well. So right here, why is that misaligned like that? Let's do a Shift Tab, Shift V, there you go. So right here, also your Shift, there we go. We're just going to do a what do you call this? Ternary operation. So this dot state dot what it would be loaded. So if it's not loaded, then we'll show the loading page. And I imported that, right? Loading page, I did not. Let's take that from here. Copy. And we will paste. Let me get some more space here. Loading page, else will show the options page. Else, show the options page, give me a format. There we go. So it's the default. Let's see if that's actually working or if I'm just tricking myself. Let's do, where are we at? Orange, let's do Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk. All right, good, so it is working. Let's go back to orange. Let's put the loaded stuff, logic in the foreground as well. So right here, we'll do what I do. This not state dot. So it's not loaded. Show the loading page. Else show the player. Paste that here. I can delete this now. Okay, so that's the options page. The options is using the context, or excuse me, the DEX using my context. So that looks good. Let's go into the options page now. This guy also uses my context, right? Yes, it does. And for what? The buttons? Yeah, the buttons. Let's do this. So it's going to be, what's it going to be? It's going to be on click is equal to, and it's going to be a function. So we'll do this. It's going to be my underscore context. It's going to be the same function, unload deck. So unload deck is just going to trigger the animation to exit off. Once it's exited off, we'll trigger another animation to slip or introduce or slide in the new deck. So it's going to be unload deck and parentheses. That's going to be a 0 to exit and 0 to exit. We need to write those two functions. And so let's go to the foreground. Now it's going to be the options page. So we need the options. I won't write the same thing in the foreground. I think that was 0 and 1. So 0 is left, 1 is right. Let's write those two functions. So, or the one function, unload deck. We'll just go down here and add the function. I think there was a load function as well, so I'll just add that now. So let's unload underscore deck, right? Unload deck. Yeah. Unload deck and load deck. Let's add those to the list of the global state. So unload deck is going to be this dot unload deck, and load deck is going to be this dot load deck. Let's copy these two. Let's go to the foreground, do the same thing. So P there, and there's a Y, and paste P. All right, let's see if it breaks. That was the options page. Doesn't break. Good. Unload, unload, unload. That's the only guy that gets clicked on this screen, right? Yeah. All right, that looks good for the context, my context for the options page. Options is good. And again, I know it's said it a lot of times, but all this really doesn't matter right now. As soon as this guy's done, we're going to copy all of this and replace all of this. So close that. And let me look, see if we're good here. So state images ledger, setting the DEX loaded to true. We have the skeleton of our functions. We'll do the next phase. We have the my context getting all of the global state, including the functions that we just wrote. We have the loading. Yeah, it looks good. Actually, I forgot one last thing, and then that's it for this video. So back into the options page. Instead of hard coding the orange, we're just going to do a my context. So my context dot, I think it's current deck. Let's see if that works. Give me the options page. Let's go to, this one should be Cyberpunk. There we go. And back to orange. There we go. All right, so that's it for the setting up the UI and the state. In the next phase, we're going to actually start coding out the logic of the front end. So all of these guys, we're going to make the, let me go back to the foreground. We're going to make the ticker tick. So I'm going to have to teach you guys a bit about the animation loops. So foreground, make the ticker tick, and we make all these buttons. When they click this, the slider is going to go down. When we click that, the GIF's going to change to a playing. The ticker's going to tick. When we click any of these or either of these two buttons, we're going to get that animation where the cassette falls into the deck. And so don't forget to give a like, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I'll see you guys in that next video.